Hello. Today we're going to be discussing the history, uses, and the chemistry behind car batteries. In these next few moments, Daniel, Will, and myself will be looking to give you the basics behind how they work and what makes them a staple in our everyday life. So, with that, let's look at the history behind car batteries. It started in 1900 as Thomas Edison and his crew revealed their newest invention, the first electric car battery. This invention came from the formula nickel 3 oxide hydroxide. The battery would go on to be standardized in 1918 as the Hudson Motor Car Company converted to using solely Battery Council International batteries. With these two factors in mind, it was only a matter of time before the standardization and development of batteries would occur. And this has led us to the modern lead acid battery. The batteries that we see used in motorcycles, scooters, wheelchairs, generators, and even our own cars are all lead acid. And while there are many different versions of the battery with their own differences, they're all classified as a lead acid battery. And we can thank for what we have today due to the foundations laid in 1971 with the Delco Remy Freedom battery. This was the first maintenance-free lead acid battery that would be allowed to fit smaller, more compact spaces. So, how exactly do we receive power from our batteries?
So today I will be continuing Teddy, Will's, and I's presentation. I will be starting from slide 4, components of a car battery. In the first bullet point says, in lead acid batteries, there's a positive plate, a cathode. Lead is obviously on the periodic table. It is made up of lead 4 oxide. Lead 4 is charged. And as we can see to the right, there's the formula for it, Pb, which is lead, and O2, which is obviously oxygen. And as we can see, there's an S, that means it is a solid, an ionic compound and a negative plate, an anode, which is made up of pure lead. As you can see, Pb is a solid. The plates are submerged in a solution of sulfuric acid, HSO4, which is an aqueous solution. A polar covalent compound in water, which formula is H2O, with a ratio of 3 to 1 water to sulfuric acid. And the last bullet point states the solution, the sulfuric acid, and the water splits into 2H plus SO4. And as we can see here, it actually becomes a decomposition as HSO4 splits into 2H plus SO4. The cathode, made up of lead 4 oxide, and there's the formula again. The hydrogen atom from the sulfuric acid gains an electron from PbO2 and then reacts to form lead plus 2H2O, which is water. As you can see to the right of that, lead oxide is added to 4 hydrogens and it produces 2 electrons, which results in lead, which becomes an aqueous solution, and 2H2O. This newly formed lead obviously produces and reacts with sulfate to produce lead SO4, which is sulfate. And the formula, as you can see here, is Pb plus SO4, and it becomes lead sulfate. Overall, the equation is PbO, which is lead oxygen, plus 4H, which is 4 hydrogens, and it produces 2 electrons. And as you can see there is SO4, which is sulfate, and then it combines to make lead SO4 and plus 2H2O. How a car battery works. An anode. The negative plate in anode is made up of pure lead, Pb, which is solid, which oxidizes and loses 2 electrons. As you can see here, since there's a negative, we lose 2. The sulfate atom from the sulfuric acid then reacts with the lead and forms, as you can see here, lead sulfate and 2 electrons. So Pb plus SO4 obviously forms lead sulfate. And the overall reaction is Pb plus SO4, which then results in lead sulfate and losing 2 electrons. And because the electrons are produced, the anode is now negatively charged.
Now for the total chemical reaction within the battery. So we start with the lead from the cathode and the lead O2 from the anode and the sulfuric acid which is flowing in the battery. And then from that we get lead sulfate plus water. And to balance this equation, because there are two leads, we'd need 2 lead sulfates, and because now there are 2 sulfates, we would need 2 sulfuric acid, and then we'd be left off with 2 water. So the balanced equation would be lead plus lead O2 plus 2 sulfuric acid plus 2 lead sulfate and 2 water. And since the positive cathode uses electrons and the negative anode produces 2 electrons, a current arises in the battery which allows the car to start and electricity to flow. Now the battery can also be recharged, and this is the process of taking electrical energy that was produced and changing it back into chemical energy. The cathode uses the 2 electrons to change the lead sulfate back into lead and sulfate, and the anode begins to oxidize, and the lead sulfate changes back into lead and sulfuric acid. These electrons that are produced from the anode go back to the cathode so that its reaction can occur. And the overall reaction is 2 lead sulfate plus 2 water equals lead plus lead O2 plus 4 hydrogen plus SO4, or 2 sulfuric acid, which is the original reactant. And these are our references, and that is it. Thank you.